Okay, picture this. You wake up one morning and in the span of a single day, everything changes. Fortunes just vanish. Millions of lives are turned completely upside down, and the entire global economy is brought to its knees. Well, that's not a movie plot. That is exactly what happened in 1929. We're talking about a crisis that literally redefined the 20th century. It's a massive question, right? But it's one we're going to unpack together. I mean, how could a stock market crash happening on just one side of the Atlantic drag the entire planet into a depression that lasted for a decade? It seems almost unbelievable. So, our story really kicks off right here, on this one day that would go down in history as Black Thursday. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some dry financial event. No, this was the first domino to fall in a chain reaction that was about to wrap its way around the entire globe. All right, so to really get a grip on the crash, you first have to understand the massive party that came right before it. We're talking about the Roaring Twenties in the United States. It was this incredible time of, unprecedented growth and optimism. But, and this is a big but, just beneath the surface of all that glittering prosperity, the foundations of the economy were, well, incredibly fragile. What was fueling this whole thing? A frenzy of what's called market speculation. You had millions of ordinary folks all dreaming of getting rich quick, just pouring their money into the stock market. And here's the crazy part. They were often doing it with borrowed money. So stock prices just skyrocketed, totally detached from what the companies were actually worth. It created this enormous, glittering bubble just waiting to pop. The source material just nails it with this description. It was a house of cards. And who was building it? The banks. They were so blinded by the lure of easy money that they were loaning out these massive sums to fuel the whole frenzy. It was an incredibly dangerous game, because if that market ever took a nosedive, they and everyone else stood to lose everything. And, well, that house of cards, it was always destined to fall. You could start to see the first cracks appearing in early 1929. But it was on October 24th that the entire structure didn't just crack, it came crashing down. The speed of this collapse was just staggering. I mean, sure, there were warning signs if you knew where to look, factories slowing down, inventories piling up. But the real panic, the sell-off, it began in earnest on Black Thursday. And by the next Tuesday, the market had completely imploded. Billions of dollars just vanished. Poof, gone. But here's the thing. This crisis wasn't just an American problem. It didn't stop at the water's edge. The chaos on Wall Street was about to set off that global domino effect we talked about, and the consequences for the rest of the world were going to be absolutely devastating. So let's trace how that chain reaction actually played out. Step 1. American banks start failing, and they take the life savings of millions of people down with them. Step 2. Those same banks call in all their international loans, basically cutting off the credit lifeline to a still recovering Europe. Step 3. Countries get desperate. They try to protect their own economies by raising these huge taxes on imports, called tariffs, which just strangles international trade. And finally, step 4. With trade at a standstill, the prices for raw materials collapse. And that just ruins the economies in places like Latin America, Asia, and Africa. It's a cascade. But look, behind all these big economic facts and figures lies the real story. And that's the devastating impact this had on ordinary people. This wasn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It was about real lives, real families, and entire futures just being shattered. Just let this number sink in for a moment. 1 in 4. By 1933, nearly 1 out of every 4 workers in America, the richest country in the world at the time, was unemployed. In the cities, jobs that had been there for years disappeared practically overnight, leaving families with absolutely nothing, no resources, and in many cases, no hope. And this is what that statistic looked like on the ground. The sources paint such a grim picture. You're talking about endless lines of people waiting for just a bowl of soup, families being evicted from their homes, and the rise of these shanty towns they called Hoovervilles, which became this really stark physical symbol of the nation's despair. And this feeling of desperation, it went global. In America, farmers got hit with a double whammy, the economic crash and the ecological disaster of the Dust Bowl. Over in Europe, the crisis led to massive strikes and huge social unrest. Now, in some places, like France, all that turmoil actually led to some major social reforms. But in Germany, the economic chaos dangerously fueled the rise of extremist political ideologies. Okay, so After all of that, what can we actually learn from this global catastrophe? Because the Great Depression wasn't just some historical event that happened and was over. No, it was this profound, painful lesson in economics, in politics, and even in human behavior. It seems like 4 really key lessons came out of the crisis. First takeaway, an economy that's built on pure speculation instead of real value is always going to be unstable. It's just fragile. Second, you need financial regulation. Unregulated banks can just pour gasoline on a fire. Third, government can actually help. Things like Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal showed that state intervention can help restart an economy and protect its citizens. And finally, number 4, protectionism, those high tariffs on trade, is harmful. It only makes the global crisis deeper and last longer. There's no doubt the Great Depression reshaped our world. It gave us this whole new understanding of just how interconnected we all are. But as we look at the global economy today, it really leaves us with one final and, I think, vital question. Have we truly learned the lessons from 1929? Or are we maybe, just maybe, destined to repeat them?